Welcome, everyone. All right. We're going to give everybody enough time to get settled. Again, thanks so much for being here. My name is Nate Snow, and I'm with Graph Advisors. My partner, Eric, who will introduce himself in a minute, and I set up Graph Advisors because we have seen a great opportunity to support GPs, funds, sponsors of funds, chiefs of staff who have all of the operational complexities that come from running a fund, but want to spend as much time as possible on deploying capital, supporting portfolio companies, and raising money and building those relationships with their LPs. We've built Graph Advisors to focus on putting wins on the board. We think about those wins on the board as moving dollars, taking capital in from LPs, putting capital in the hands of entrepreneurs and founders. To move money, you got to move paper. To move paper, you got to align people. So we're really happy to be with you all today. Eric, you want to take it from here with a quick introduction?
Thanks, Nate. Eric Friedman here, one of the co-founders of Graph Advisors. We think that operational excellence is core to any business, and especially working with fund managers and allocators. My background's been in early stage VC and startups, and it's great to be with you all. I'll turn it over to Gary.
Well, great. Thanks a lot, Eric. My name is Gary Ross. I've been an attorney about 20 years. I'm with Ross Law Group, and we just had our 10-year anniversary a couple of months ago. We focus on securities law and primarily fund formation and the regulatory aspects that come out of funds. So really forming and maintaining funds, a lot of form ADVs and the like, and then we also do public and private securities offerings.
This time that we have set aside to review and prepare for the end of year transition into the new year is really meant to be for you all. So feel free to take advantage of the Q&A feature of this webinar. Drop questions in. Eric or I or Gary will be monitoring those questions. We're going to give some voice to them, and we've set aside some time at the end of this presentation to just come off to answer those questions live as well. So make the most of it. We'll also drop a few resources in towards the end that you can take with you. And we'll send out a follow-up email with links. We're going to spend a couple of minutes on the why of an end-of-year health and performance review. Then we're going to get into some of the components, the what of an end-of-year health and performance review. And then Gary's going to walk through some really important stuff relative to changes in regulation, Form ADV filings, all of the good things to keep your fund in great working condition for 2024. And then we'll turn it over to some of the questions. So feel free at any point, drop a question in. We'll track it. We'll come to it either live in the moment or we'll put it in at the end. And also, this is just for informational purposes. So just keep that in mind as we're going through here. So first up, the why of an end of year health and performance review. At the end of the day, the most important thing is your time. For every minute that you are chasing down a compliance task, digging through your emails for an executed document, coordinating with an audit team, is a minute that you're not spending generating returns for your LPs. Your LPs have given you their capital so that you spend time multiplying their capital. We do a health and performance review to give GPs and investors more time back, because more time back should translate, if you've got a good investment process and you like your investment decisions, into more capital deployed, more founders funded, long-term returns climbing the J curve, and into not only the current fund, but the next fund as you go from one fund to the next, all the way to a firm. So underneath that, these things don't just happen on their own. We think, and Eric mentioned this, that tying it all together are sound operational processes that can stand the test of time. These processes can help you grow from a first fund to a second fund, from a second fund into a firm, build a team and build a culture that LPs, founders, vendors know exactly what's going on, know what their role is, and know how to add value so that you, as the investor, the GP, are as much as possible doing the thing that only you can do, which is making investment decisions and bringing in big dollars from LPs for your fund. So that's a little bit of the why. The what, we like to start off with the summary paragraph. Before you start to think through how the year went, take a moment, go to a coffee shop, find a quiet spot in the park, whatever you need to do, but write it down. What happened this year? How did my year go? Use that summary paragraph as an anchor to align your team, to align your LPs, to align your vendors. This is how the year went for my fund. These were the highlights. These were the challenges. This is where we landed. That summary paragraph, top of mind for you, you narrate it, you communicate it. You think you're going to say it one time, but people won't really hear it until you say it 10 times. So you have to be clear yourself. And then once you're clear, it then forms the basis of your end of year LP update, emails to founders when you want to summarize the year and celebrate with them. And also as you're building relationships and soliciting new founders, as you look ahead, this is what we learned this year. This is what we want to do next year. So it all starts with a very clear executive view of the year. You as the GP, as the sponsor, you're the only one who can provide that. Everyone's going to have an opinion, but your opinion matters more. So just be really clear about it. If you don't lead with your opinion, other people's opinions are going to start to fill that void. Maybe it aligns with yours, maybe it doesn't. That's the importance of a summary paragraph. From there, we go to portfolio company updates and valuations. It's one thing to have an opinion of how your year went. It's another thing to then ground that in data. What are the things that we have seen from our portfolio companies? So this is things like requesting material updates from all portfolio companies, confirm the active and inactive status of your companies, review your fund valuation policy, determine if valuation changes are needed, conduct a valuation discussion with your partners, and then use what you learn from this to then construct really clear annual updates and have a conversation with your fund administrator on the value of your portfolio and have some really key stats at hand. How many deals we invested in? How many companies are currently active? How many companies are not active? What was the number of markdowns? What was the number of markups? You want to be able to rattle all of these off as you tell the story of your year. Next, portfolio modeling and pacing. So this is where you're going to step back and think, how many deals did I do this year? And what is it relative to how many deals I expected to do? A year ago, there were a lot of people who were thinking 2023 was going to be in the tank, that it was going to be a recession. Facebook was down significantly this time last year, and that isn't how the year went. So what is your pacing looking like? What changed for you? So you want to go back to your foundational portfolio model and look at, what was I expecting to do? What did I do? What was the average check size for 2023 versus 2022 and 2021? What was the median valuation of the company at the time of investment for 2023 versus 2022 and 2021? Are we on pace to deploy the capital within the investment period that we committed to our limited partners? Do we need to speed up a little bit in 2024, or do we need to slow down? These are all decisions that you can make now so that your plan for Q1 comes together. Also, this allows you to step back and answer some other big questions. What's the net asset value of my fund? What's the markup? What's our total value to paid in capital? Have we distributed? What's the distributions to paid in? All of those good things that help you look at the scoreboard and know how you're doing. Next up, real quick, we want really clean communication with your fund administrator. This is just all of the simple blocking and tackling of, do we have an executed version of every deal doc? Have we shared that executed version with our fund administration team? Set aside some time now to get that in order so that you're not as distracted as the market as you get ramped back up into 2024. Other thing, have you sent all to your bookkeeper, to your fund admin team, all of the invoices and receipts for your 2023 fund expenses? Really making sure that you can document every penny, that again, when it comes time to the audit, the double entry accounting, all that lines up with as little friction for you as possible. And then the final thing you want to check through is, in 2023, let's confirm that we calculated and then paid the management fee correctly, so there are no surprises about an underpaid or an overpaid management fee, and then having to work through that process in a new year. And then the final quick thing, we'll go a little faster here. Vendor check-ins. You're going to hear from your audit team. You're going to hear from your tax team. Legal counsel will probably check in. Two that might not always be top of mind. One is your insurance policy. Is your VCAP insurance policy up to date? Have you paid the premium? Have you renewed? And the second thing is banking. A lot of GPs, a lot of funds in the aftermath of Silicon Valley Bank created new bank accounts. Maybe you still have some old bank accounts at SVB that have a zero balance. Maybe now's the right time to close those out, get them off your books so you can start 2024 with only the accounts you need. So that's quick things on some of the what you can focus on. We'll share all of this in a handy checklist form at the end of this call. Gary, I think you're up on some legal stuff. You want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. Gosh, I need to catch my breath after you really sailed through all that. So for a lot of the things I'll talk about aren't necessarily year end like December 31 things, but just good, things to keep in mind and to start the new year fresh. One is a general LPA review. Though it seems super basic, we're constantly faced with situations where a limited partnership agreement is not fully executed. And usually it's the signature of the general partner that is missing. People will have a subscription package. The LPA signature page will be in there. So you'll have the signatures from the LPs, but then there never will have been the GP sign and then put it all together because they were so focused on the LP. And it's kind of a bad look when later somebody asks you, God forbid, it's a regulator, or sometimes it's a potential large investor. Hey, send me your fully executed LPA. For some reason they need that. And then it's like, oh, wait, let me go ahead and sign it on our side. That's not a good look. So I want to go ahead and make sure you have a fully executed LPA there. Same with the subscription agreements. Like I said, a lot of subscription packages, the way we like to do it too, will have an LPA signature page there, in addition to signing the subscription agreement and then the investor questionnaire, and especially having an up-to-date schedule of your LP. So you have all that there, which can be important on this next one. So whether Form Ds can be timely filed. So Form Ds, they're not due at the end of the year unless for some reason you thought you'd launch on January 1, which some people do. But it is good to make sure that a Form D has filed, though some people might tell you, hey, nobody files a Form D. A lot of people do file a Form D. And if you're raising a subsequent fund, let's say you've only raised one fund and then you're going to have a second fund and it's going to be bigger and better than Fund 1, some people might ask you, hey, you didn't have a Form D filing for Fund 1, and you don't want to say, well, my friends told me I didn't have to do it. According to the law, you're supposed to have a Form D filed within the first day of an LP close. The first time it was irrevocable, really, from the LP perspective. Form Ds do need to be amended every year if you're still raising. If you're still raising, or you were more than 5% off, because you have to say how much you are looking to raise, or if there's any material information that changed, then you might have to amend the Form D. Also, on jurisdictional issues on the blue sky filing. So having to do a blue sky filing everywhere. And that's when you might get triggered with some late fees if you're not on top of it. The most important thing is the Form ADV. So the Form ADV, though it's due on March 31 of next year, there is a fee that's due. The FINRA fee is due, and I believe it's due on December the 11th. There are some states like California that if you don't pay on December the 11th, they will go ahead and cancel your ERA registration, and they'll go ahead and administratively withdraw it. They're the most aggressive state. We deal with all 50 states, and out of all 50, California is the most aggressive. Most of the others, if you don't hit the December deadline, then they'll give you some leeway, but California, they'll get you right away. Generally, if you're registered in a state or have an ERA filing in a state, you're going to have two fees that are due, the state fee and the FINRA fee that's due. So just keep that in mind. And then updating your information in the Form ADV. So things like the list of funds and SPVs. For us, we look at the current one and then we send it to the client and say, hey, are these still your funds, SPVs? Making sure that information is accurate, because sometimes people will be like, oh, no, we closed that a long time ago. If you're using a platform, allocation, sidecar, AngelList, or something like that, sometimes that process is different. You might have to be pinging them for the fund identification numbers. Other information in the ADV, and sometimes there's been a change in February or March. For example, recently we had a situation where we had to remove somebody from the general partner. And then it turns out that the ownership percentage was incorrect in the Form ADV because the change had been made in February or March. And then at the end of the year, we asked them if anything had changed. And they're like, no, nothing changed. They had forgotten about 10 months ago. And so we had the wrong ownership percentage. So make sure you're going over everything and that everything is accurate in the Form ADV. Don't just assume that everything is fine the way it is. Let's talk about the regulatory changes for this year, the private fund advisor rules. For most folks, the compliance period is in 18 months, but there are reasons, which I'll go into, why you might want to go ahead and update documents now. If the AUM is under 1.5 billion, then it's 18 months. If it happens to be over, then kudos for you, and it's 12 months. Restricted activities rule. So there were several things on these private fund advisor rules that were initially supposed to be prohibited, and the SEC kind of stepped down. The things that I'll mention are the expense allocation method. So if there's regulatory expenses, you have to get consent from a majority of the LPs. It has to be advance consent, and it has to be the actual amount that's being spent. So you can't just have it in the LPA that you're agreeing to be responsible for our regulatory expenses and the like. It has to be the exact number. So the SEC really wants you to get an active consent from everyone, and you have to ask for a consent from every single LP. So even though you only need majority consent, you have to ask for consent to everyone. I'll go ahead and I'll talk about the side letters one, because that's really the most important. And that's the one you should keep in mind. A lot of times in side letters, there'll be a provision there that says that the side letter is confidential. But with the new regulatory changes, while you don't have to share the side letters with everyone, you do have to share the substance of the side letters with people and what deals different investors get. And so the way to do that, you can have a spreadsheet or whatever. But at the end of the day, what you have in the side letter is not going to stay confidential. You're not going to be disclosing investor names and the like, but whatever deal somebody got, other investors are going to know. So that's something to keep in mind. I would go ahead and have in my documents now or in your side letters now that people are going to know. If it's a material preference that's been given, then people have to know prior to their admission to the fund. And then if it's not something that's considered a material preference in a side letter, then it just has to be disclosed to the other investors no less than annually.
Thanks, Gary. I really appreciate it. If folks have questions, feel free to jump in. Here's a good one. Helpful reminder on the Delaware franchise tax. That one sneaks up on people every year. That is March 1st, 2024. Open up your calendar right now and put a calendar hold on February 15th. Don't give Delaware more money than they deserve for missing the deadline. So that's a good reminder. Thanks for that one.
And you have to pay those registered agent fees too.
Yeah. Yep. One more question. Eric, you've spent a lot of time thinking through LP updates. How do you think through the level of detail to give to LPs in summarizing and talking about the year that just wrapped up? What's the right balance between oversharing versus not sharing enough?
Thanks, Nate. It comes down to two things. One, serving the needs of the LP and why they supported you and partnered with you in the first place. Some, it's for information, learnings, and recognizing what's going on in a sector. There are people that have invested, especially in emerging managers, where they have signed up to get information about the category you're focused on. And if they have, the question you need to ask is, how do you deliver on that promise? The second is someone that's a little bit more in the family office machine or in a larger institution and serving up that information they need to go to their boss, their principal, or their constituents in an organized way. If you can serve their organizational need, meaning the data and metadata about your portfolio in the form and way they need to submit it next to the 50 other funds they're committed to, you're doing them a service. And so I think about those two reasons. If it's a small allocator or maybe someone's signed up to support you because they want to learn, how do you answer the call? And then the second is just organizational and operational excellence. How do you give them what they need so they can succeed in their job? So that principal, that endowment, that retirement association can say, this is one of our best GP fund managers because we're getting everything we need extremely fast.
Thanks, Eric. Gary, can you walk back through another question came through here in terms of repeating the dates? So the California filing date and then the FINRA deadline. What should people put on their calendars?
December the 11th is the main one. So that's when the fee is due, when the annual fee. And then the filing is due on March 31. So that if they're a California ERA, then that's going to be December the 11th for all users.
And that's two separate ones, Gary. There's a California on December 11th, and then in March 31st is the FINRA filing.
Yeah, so some people are like, hey, I just handled this. But yeah. I have a question for you all. How much should fund managers push back on portfolio company valuations, either up or down? If you know it's been a rough year for them, they're in some field, I don't want to insult any field, but say they're still making buggy whips, and you know that the car has eclipsed horse and buggy.
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that we focus on, particularly with early managers that are just getting started, is declaring an approach to valuation even before the fund begins investing. That way you have an anchor and you have a precedent. The most common that we see is using the latest price round. If that's been within the past 12 months, you usually are pretty good to go. If you get into a later where the investment amount and the valuations can fluctuate, there's going to be more steps that you would take, whether it's incorporating 409A, hiring an external valuation third-party service that looks at revenue and all kinds of other things. Where most of our clients on the earlier side, we hold a firm line on, if it's been within the past year, use the most recent price round. If it was longer than a year, we need to have a really clear rationale to hold it at cost. That should be the company is still active. They're still pursuing the same general mission. They are seeing revenue that is indicating that it's still a going concern. One way to think about it, though, is their sign of impairment. We invested in the company to do buggy whips, but now they're doing kerosene lanterns. And they actually don't know anything about kerosene lanterns, so they're just getting started. Well, that would probably mean that that company is impaired, that pivot is so significant that we need to re-underwrite that investment. And depending on the cost basis, it might just be easier to write that all the way down to zero as an unrealized loss. The company is still active, so they would still be part of the portfolio. But from the valuation standpoint, it's at zero. And who knows? You might look up in 3 years and all of a sudden they're the best kerosene lamp maker around. If you need to go on with the rest of your day, feel free to drop off here. Thanks so much for making this part of your day and for your commitment to building a really strong foundation as you end 2023 and head into 2024. Thanks, everybody.